I have consorted with the Delawares, who are their mortal and natural enemies; but I never pull trigger on one of the miscreants unless it be plain that his death will lead to some good end. The deer never leaped that fell by my hand wantonly. By living much alone with God in the wilderness, a man gets to feel the justice of such opinions. One life is sufficient for our present wants, and there may yet be occasion to use Killdeer on behalf of the Sarpent, who has done an untimorsome thing to let them rampant devils so plainly know that he is in their neighborhood. As I'm a wicked sinner, there is one of them prowling along the bank this very moment, like one of the boys of the garrison skulking behind a fallen tree to get a shot at a squirrel." As the Pathfinder pointed with his finger while speaking, the quick eye of Jasper soon caught the object towards which it was directed. One of the young warriors of the enemy, burning with a desire to distinguish himself, had stolen from his party towards the cover in which Chingachgook had concealed himself, and as the latter was deceived by the apparent apathy of his foes, as well as engaged in some further preparations of his own, he had evidently obtained a position where he got a sight of the Delaware. This circumstance was apparent by the arrangements the Iroquois was making to fire, for Chingachgook himself was not visible from the western side of the river. The rift was at a bend in the Oswego, and the sweep of the eastern shore formed a curve so wide that Chingachgook was quite near to his enemies in a straight direction, though separated by several hundred feet on the land, owing to which fact air lines brought both parties nearly equidistant from the Pathfinder and Jasper. The general width of the river being a little less than 200 yards, such necessarily was about the distance between his two observers and the skulking Iroquois. "The Sarpent must be thereabouts," observed Pathfinder, who never turned his eye for an instant from the young warrior, "and yet he must be strangely off his guard to allow a Mingo devil to get his stand so near, with manifest signs of bloodshed in his heart." "See," interrupted Jasper, "there is the body of the Indian the Delaware shot. It is drifted on a rock, and the current has forced his head and face above the water." "Quite likely, boy, quite likely. Human nature is little better than a log of driftwood, when the life that has been breathed into its nostrils is departed. That Iroquois will never harm any one more, but yonder skulking savage is bent on taking the scalp of my best and most tried friend." The Pathfinder suddenly interrupted himself by raising his rifle, a weapon of unusual length, with admirable precision, and firing the instant it had got its level. The Iroquois on the opposite shore was in the act of aiming when the fatal messenger from Killdeer arrived. His rifle was discharged, it is true, but it was with the muzzle in the air, while the man himself plunged into the bushes, quite evidently hurt, if not slain. "The skulking reptile brought it on himself," muttered Pathfinder sternly, as, dropping the butt of his rifle, he carefully commenced reloading it. "Chingachgook and I have consorted together since we were boys, and have fit in company on the Horican, the Mohawk, the Ontario, and all the other bloody passes between the country of the Frenchers and our own. And did the foolish knave believe that I would stand by and see my best friend cut off in an ambushment?" "We have served the Sarpent as good a turn as he served us. Those rascals are troubled, Pathfinder, and are falling back into their covers, since they find we can reach them across the river." "The shot is no great matter, Jasper, no great matter. Ask any of the 60th, and they can tell you what Killdeer can do, and has done, and that, too, when the bullets were flying about our heads like hailstones. No, no, this is no great matter, and the unthoughtful vagabond drew it down on himself." "Is that a dog or a deer swimming towards this shore?" Pathfinder started, for sure enough an object was crossing the stream, above the rift, towards which, however, it was gradually setting by the force of the current. A second look satisfied both the observers that it was a man, and an Indian, though so concealed as at first to render it doubtful. Some stratagem was apprehended, and the closest attention was given to the movements of the stranger. "He is pushing something before him as he swims, and his head resembles a drifting bush," said Jasper. "'Tis Indian devilry, boy, but Christian honesty shall circumvent their arts." As the man slowly approached, the observers began to doubt the accuracy of their first impressions, and it was only when 2/3 of the stream were passed that the truth was really known. "The big sarpent, as I live!" exclaimed Pathfinder, looking at his companion, and laughing until the tears came into his eyes with pure delight at the success of the artifice. "He has tied bushes to his head so as to hide it, put the horn on top, lashed the rifle to that bit of log he is pushing before him, and has come over to join his friends. Ah's me! The times and times that he and I have cut such pranks, right in the teeth of Mingos raging for our blood in the great thoroughfare round and about Ty."
"It may not be the Sarpent after all, Pathfinder. I can see no feature that I remember."
"Feature! Who looks for features in an Indian? No, no, boy, 'tis the paint that speaks, and none but a Delaware would wear that paint. Them are his colors. Jasper, just as your craft on the lake wears St. George's cross, and the Frenchers set their tablecloths to fluttering in the wind with all the stains of fish bones and venison steaks upon them. Now, you see the eye, lad, and it is the eye of a chief. But, Eau douce, fierce as it is in battle, and glassy as it looks from among the leaves," here the Pathfinder laid his fingers lightly but impressively on his companion's arm, "I have seen it shed tears like rain. There is a soul and a heart under that red skin, rely on it, although they are a soul and a heart with gifts different from our own."
"No one who is acquainted with the chief ever doubted that."
"I know it," returned the other proudly, "for I have consorted with him in sorrow and in joy. In one I have found him a man, however stricken; in the other, a chief who knows that the women of his tribe are the most seemly in light merriment. But, hist! It is too much like the people of the settlements to pour soft speeches into another's ear, and the Sarpent has keen senses. He knows I love him, and that I speak well of him behind his back; but a Delaware has modesty in his inmost nature, though he will brag like a sinner when tied to a stake." The Serpent now reached the shore, directly in front of his two comrades, with whose precise position he must have been acquainted before leaving the eastern side of the river, and, rising from the water, he shook himself like a dog and made the usual exclamation, "Hugh!" End of chapter.